All right, let's move on. Do you want to go? What do you want to talk about, John? Do you want to talk Seahawks? Do you want to talk college basketball?
Let's talk Hawks. Only one big discussion point to have, but we're a little late on this, a little overdue. Obviously, we had our draft conversation last week. Because of that, we didn't have the time to touch on weekly news. So we're a little late to the party when it comes to discussing the Ryan Grubb firing. Mike McDonald, head coach of the Seahawks, decided to part ways with offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb after just 1 year. I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but Tyler, why don't you step us in? What are your initial thoughts about the Ryan Grubb firing?
Initial thoughts were I was kind of shocked. I mean, as a guy, Ryan Grubb seems like a great dude and did a lot for the University of Washington and that football program, and it seemed like he really grew into that role. And after you don't see a lot of like offensive coordinators who it's literally his first year in the NFL. You don't see a lot of them who are like given that opportunity and then it's immediately taken away from them. And he didn't even really do anything wrong, it felt like.
They won 10 games.
Yeah, they won 10 games. So it was just like a little shocking. We talked about the Seahawks problems kind of all season offensively when it comes to, they were unable to establish the run game, things like that. But I was still like, give this guy an opportunity because, UW was like an air raid offense when he was there. It was Michael Penix. Like it was a different style of thing. They didn't have to run the ball. And when they did, it was effective enough because he was able to develop screenplays. And we saw that happen with the Seahawks. We'll see he was unable to really do anything with the run game because the line was just so atrocious. And so I was still like, as I said before, just shocked that happened.
Yeah, those were my initial feelings as well. First year head coach and coordinator. There's no pressure. Nobody's on the hot seat. Certainly nobody's talking about firing McDonald after his first season.
Yeah.
First year for both of them, they accumulate 10 wins in an up and down season. That's a success. That's a success for those two guys. I don't think there was any pressure on either of them to be forced out. And so I agree with you that I thought it was a questionable move because like you said, Grubb built a very successful passing offense. He was, maybe it was just time, but he seems to be a big contributor behind JSN breaking out in a really real way into the NFL, which both of us are obviously very pleased about. Big part about keeping this offense, viable on paper, even though the offensive line and running game were so bad. First year, he's learning lessons. This is a college coordinator. Give him 1 year. There's no reason to think he wouldn't be better next year. And the last thing is, and this may be one of the bigger ones, is, not only did Mike McDonald throw out a potential scapegoat, but now he's also putting more pressure on himself in his position where, say they stick together and next year the Hawks are very disappointing. Well, then he's got in his back pocket, time to fire the offensive coordinator. Don't look at me. The coaches do that shit all the time. And he gave that away. Now he chose to fire the offensive coordinator early. Now next year, if the offense really struggles, it's his fault directly because he chose to get rid of Ryan Grubb and an offense that won 10 games and showed some real signs of life. If their offense is worse next year, there are going to be a lot of eyes on McDonald, where that would not have been the case if he would have stood pat. So career-wise, I thought it was an interesting move by Mike McDonald. Now, playing on his side a little bit, there are aspects of this that I do understand. Understanding who Mike McDonald is, that he's a Harbaugh guy, that he's a Ravens and Michigan football guy. He wants to build an offense that runs the football. He wants to build an offense that lives through the running game and where the passing game is supplementary. Now, that wasn't an option this last year. Grubb didn't do anything wrong with this offensive line and with this running game. It was not possible for them to be a top 10 rushing team in the NFL. It wasn't. But if that's the direction that McDonald is trying to go, in the draft, in free agency, etc., if he's looking to bolster the line and get some running backs in here and turn the Seahawks into a rushing first team, then I do understand wanting to move away from Ryan Grubb because I don't think there's any indication that Grubb could ever really be that guy. We know who Grubb is. He wants to air raid. You and I were frustrated at times at UW with his inability to use Dustin Johnson. Dustin Johnson. That's
sure.
Right?
I think it might be Washington. I don't remember. Or no.
No.
We'll remember. I'll remember it at some point.
I think it was Dustin Johnson. But anyway, his inability to use some really talented running backs to great effect. He kind of leaned pretty heavy on the passing game, and it got him to the national championship. But we know who Grubb is, and if McDonald is looking at this guy and saying, hey, he's really good at his job, but this is not the team I'm looking to build, I can understand that.
Yeah, and another thing is, like, it kind of makes McDonald look like a guy who's out to get wins. Like, if he thinks that something is wrong within his system, he's, this proves that he's a guy that's just going to go out and make it right. Whether he thinks that is through firing, through what if he thinks that the team needs a player, like, he's going to talk to the GM and the ownership and, make things happen. And I like it for McDonald in that regard. I do understand, like we were saying, it was kind of shocking. And but I do understand, your point of he's also a guy that probably wants to run the football, and in that sense, he's a defensive guy. Take time off the clock, give his defense time to work, and time to rest. So yeah, I think as a coaching tandem, I don't think that those two styles really gelled together. I think that was potentially what it could have been. It's just like, hey, you're throwing the ball 3 times in our drive, and we immediately have to come back on the field. Our defense is tired. It's not working for our scheme if they are not playing up to snuff. And then, they can just that can kind of butt heads a little bit if the two styles don't really match what they want to do. So I understand Mike McDonald's idea with that, but still shocking since it was the first year for Grubb. Yeah,
and I do just want to emphasize again, like, I think it might just be a little too soon to be doing this, just in terms of, like, now he better go find a guy that can run his style of offense. That's a big thing he's got to take care of this offseason. And he better make some serious changes to this team so that when that guy is implementing the offense he wants, it doesn't look as horrible as you can imagine it could look. Can you imagine if this last season, if they'd been like, we're going to run the ball 25 times a game, it would have been horrible. This offense would have looked awful.
Yep.
So, and it's a bit of a stretch of an analogy, but just bear with me on this. It's kind of like somebody, this guy's driving a Ford F-150 in, the cold of Michigan. And it's like, you know what? This isn't how I want to drive. I want to drive, warm, open road, convertible style vehicle. So he goes and sells his Ford F-150 and goes and buys a convertible, but are you still in Michigan or are you moving? That's kind of the point. Like, is he going to build this team with the tools necessary to be the offense that he wants to be? Because if he just hires an OC that wants to run the ball and then runs this team back, it's going to be a disaster. Ryan Grubb's offense worked with this collection of offensive talent at the quarterback and at the receivers. He made as much as I think you could make out of this flawed offense. So I do think I understand what McDonald is thinking, but he's got a big set of tasks on his list for this to make sense for next year. And I'm not certain that he can accomplish all of it. So my takeaway right now, I'll be happy to be surprised, but my takeaway is I think this was done too soon, and McDonald will regret this decision.
Yeah, regret is a strong word. That's an interesting take. One thing that I do want to point out is the receivers this year had a really good season. All things considered, DK didn't have a season that was expected, but like JSN popped off this year. He had the best season of his career by far. Obviously, it's been 2 years now, but it's like he became a star this year. Gino, I think one of his better seasons, all things considered. Still had interceptions, still made mistakes, but as skill players go, it was probably their best years in a while, and especially offensively. And you can attribute that to Ryan Grubb's style offense. It's like these opportunities were given to them because of the way that they played. And for all the crap that Grubb got from DK yelling at him over the mic when he took those headphones in week 12 or whatever it was like they were still talking. There was still a discussion to be had between them, and they were all doing well. The team was performing good enough to win 10 games, be competing for the NFC West division. It's like they were in a good enough spot, and if you put a line around this team, I think there's really a chance for Grubb to have done something really great. And either way, you're still going to have to draft a line because you have the running backs, you have the receivers, you have the quarterback for the most part. You have the team that is constructed. And whether you want to run the football or you want to pass, you still have to get offensive linemen. And so the offseason plan, doesn't really change necessarily. Besides, now
Yeah, it was
you've
still
given
the
yourself
plan.
now you've given yourself another thing to do when it comes to offensive coordinator. It comes to implementing a new system under that offensive coordinator. Like you said, it's just a lot of things to do. And at the end of the day, the offseason plan for building the team is going to kind of remain the same.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it might just add more things to that list because to your point, yeah, offensive line was already a big need. But now they probably have to improve at the running back position. I personally don't think Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet are a talented enough group to be the engine of a run-first NFL offense. They're not top 10 running backs in the NFL.
Especially with Walker getting injured all the time.
Yeah, totally. So, I guess if Genty or something falls to the Seahawks, which I doubt will happen, but if something like that happens, maybe that's where they find their star running back. But I think not only now do they have to build the line, but they also probably have to improve at running back too. So we'll see. We'll see. McDonald, he's pleasantly surprised me as a coach so far, but this decision, I'm a little surprised.
Yeah.